Pokemon Legends Arceus is a very fun game, and I have mostly positive things to say. Long story short, if you enjoy Pokemon the same way I do, then this is the logical and wonderful evolution for people like us. People who like to catch 'em all. The simple act of aiming a Pokeball yourself in a safari hunt is more satisfying than I imagined it to be. But this is the first Pokemon game of its kind, and I can only imagine its sequels being exponentially better. Maybe even to the point of rendering this one obsolete. So here's the top 10 things I want to see in Pokemon Legends 2, because despite loving this game, I actually just want to complain about it, and this is the most positive and respectful way to do that. This video will be mostly spoiler free, and I'll try to avoid obvious requests like add more Pokemon or make more areas, unless I have very strong feelings on the matter. So let's get my biggest and most obvious one out of the way, the visuals. Ever since Pokemon jumped to 3D, I had some misgivings with the direction. The Pokemon themselves and their designs are still charming, but most of the Pokemon had more personality in their sprite work than in their 3D counterparts. Largely because the sprite work is like looking at an illustration of the Pokemon with dramatic posing and all that, while the models are very straightforward, more accurate but also less stylized. It's like comparing a painting of an animal to a model in a textbook. However, I am glad to see Arceus using the 3D models in a way only 3D models can be used, in a dynamic 3D safari environment. The models being straightforward presentations of the Pokemon work when they're running around in their natural habitat and not standing in a void. And that's the most obvious charm of Legends Arceus, being on a safari hunt with actual Pokemon. While they were at it, Game Freak also fixed a few issues I had with the 3D models, such as making more dynamic poses for some Pokemon during battle, the most obvious example being Luxray here. But in all honesty, I'd find it hard to argue that Arceus overall is as visually appealing and inspired as the sprite work from generations 1 to 5. Everything in those games, from the simple menus, the Pokemon sprites, the bobblehead trainers, it's very much seared into my brain as a pleasant, comfy aesthetic. While my view on Arceus and the Gen 6 to 8 games is rough around the edges. This roughness is most abundant in the textures, which become more clearly flawed when on a ride Pokemon. When you're walking on your feet, the history region can feel big and wonderful, but once you have a bird's eye view and you stare at the ground long enough, the magic slowly disappears. You might make similar arguments against something like Breath of the Wild, but gliding in that game only made me appreciate the world of Hyrule more. I'm sure it wasn't easy to create all the locations and models in Arceus and coding them together in a functional way, because making games is never easy, but there is very little in this game that was visually impressive or even greatly appealing to me. Outside of the Pokemon and character designs themselves, of course. Pokemon will probably always excel in that regard. It's not lost on me that asking for better visuals is an incredibly vague and obvious suggestion, because anyone can think of a dozen different ways visuals can be improved off the top of their heads. And everyone wants their game to look as beautiful as possible. But it's what I feel Arceus is lacking the most, so I'd be foolish to leave it unsaid in this video. But even if the visuals remain more or less the same, I would still want, number 2, a photo mode. Now I should probably elaborate on what I mean by that, because there is a photo studio with very limited options already in Arceus, and a capture button built into the Switch. But I want a more versatile camera to take pictures with. I struggled very much to fit my entire team into a photo upon first completing the game. And if I could do more with the camera, or if the studio had more options, I think I could easily get a far better picture to share than this one. But more than that, a camera mode would be a great addition for the open world. I brought up Breath of the Wild earlier, but that's not the only open world game with a versatile camera mode. Gravity Rush being another example I really love. When you have a beautiful open world to play around in, the urge to capture it in a picture is only natural. Even though I said the visuals in Arceus are a little rough around the edges, the Pokemon themselves are still incredibly pleasing to the eye. Imagine if part of filling out the Pokédex was snapping a picture for each Pokemon, and what pictures you manage to get can replace the default pictures. There's also a large amount of potential for side missions. Here's a short list of ideas I think could be fun to do in Legends Arceus as it is right now. Need I remind everyone that there is literally a whole Pokemon game dedicated to taking pictures of Pokemon. Arceus may not be able to deliver the meticulously timed on-rails spectacle of Pokemon Snap, but a large part of the charm in a game's photo mode and photography in general is in finding picturesque beauty in a dynamic, breathing world. And Arceus has over 100 charming models to choose from. A photo mode doesn't need to be super advanced. Personally, I could do with a simple first person mode with a zoom function. That would be more than enough to have a great deal of fun. Although we could make this even better with my third suggestion. Number 3, Pokemon accessories. Building a team of Pokemon can be a very fun way to express your personal tastes while trying to balance out something viable for the gameplay. But I think we could make this process more involved and more personal if we could add accessories to our Pokemon. Now, I'm not asking for anything crazy. I don't want like a flowing cape or a full-blown costume for a Pokemon. Just a humble selection of hats, collars, and handkerchiefs would make this a worthwhile inclusion. My shiny Psyduck is adorable, but wouldn't he look more adorable with a party hat on? You know I'm right. This might sound like a real hard addition to implement, but there's kind of already an example of this very thing in Legends Arceus. I'm sure not the only one who's noticed that the red eyes on alpha Pokemon are very much tacked on. If you look close enough on this Machamp, you can see it resembles a pair of glasses or contacts. Imagine having the option to add those alpha eyes to any of your Pokemon, or heck even just replace the alpha eyes with like a pair of sunglasses or something. It probably wouldn't be very difficult to use a similar function to give my Gudra here a cowboy hat, or your Lopunny GF a diamond collar. I think having variants for Pokemon like Shiny and Alpha is a great way to make the collectathon aspect more exciting, but those are really the only two options for distinguishing your Pokemon, and it's really just if you're lucky enough to catch one. Aside from a handful of gender differences and an even smaller handful of alternative forms. A humble cowboy hat can make my lovely Curly that much more handsome, while illustrating the personality I imagine him to have. The relationship between player and Pokemon is exactly what these games are about, which is why I think Ride Pokemon should be caught. In the mainline Pokemon games, HMs were always annoying. They did serve a good function in allowing for your Pokemon to interact with the overworld, and for you to interact with them in some way, all while allowing some prior areas to lock some sections and secrets away for a second visit. But because most of these moves suck and they couldn't be deleted easily, it made them feel like a burden. Like you either had to hamper one of your party members' movesets, or you had to swap one out for a Pokemon dedicated to using that move. Sun and Moon's Ride Pokemon and Arceus' Flute Pokemon are a good step in the right direction. Not only in how interactions with the Pokemon are less abstract, but also in that you didn't have to work your movesets around them. But it is a case of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because narratively they aren't really your Pokemon. You didn't find this Weirdeer in the wild and catch it in a Pokeball like you will 200 other Pokemon. The game's plot just kinda threw it into your lap while saying, oh, they'll help you out, but they aren't actually your Pokemon, but they're your friends, and it's not great. Now I'm sure it sounds silly to some of you. I literally have an alpha Weirdeer caught, so why can't I just imagine that this Weirdeer I summoned with a magic flute is mine? Well, I could, but I think it'd be cooler if I didn't have to. How much more satisfying would it be if you had to catch a Standler and evolve it yourself? If you had to work in order to get access to the convenience of a Weirdeer that can run across the world several times faster than you can? Like, what if you actually had to do what the game already incentivizes you to do and catch some freaking Pokemon? Even if it temporarily halts your progress, I can't think of a mission more appropriate than catching a specific species of Pokemon in a game explicitly about catching Pokemon. There's already even some missions that ask you to catch specific Pokemon. This would also give you more of an attachment to the Ride Pokemon in question. Of course you can't have a real relationship with a digital composite of 1s and 0s, but when you spend enough time playing these games and using a Pokemon, they become like a digital illustration of your memories playing the game. And it's only natural to feel some attachment. It's those kinds of feelings that the Pokemon franchise has been thriving on since day one. Number 5. More environmental interaction / wild Pokemon interacting with each other. When you spend enough time with any game, the world it presents to you will inevitably start to feel artificial. If you ever seriously tried to speedrun a game, you might know exactly what I'm talking about. The lore and illusion of the fiction begin to disappear into a sea of 0s and 1s for you to exploit. And I feel the way that Pokemon reacted in Sword and Shield's wild area were especially susceptible to this weakness. Pokemon either ran away or chased after you, there wasn't much middle ground. Arceus is largely the same, albeit with some very nice improvements. For starters, seeing a Pokemon perform an attack in the overworld or seeing a Starly actually fly up in the air to escape you can help keep the illusion alive longer. I don't think this was ever a huge concern with the older games, because all the mechanics are abstract to the point you wouldn't be led to think about it. But Legends is clearly trying to break that abstraction and bring you closer to the Pokemon. There are even some Pokemon with unique dispositions like Blissey who will run up to you and help you if you're injured. But I have to say I'm disappointed that Pokemon don't interact much with each other or integrate into the environments as much as I'd like. Shaking trees and flying Pokemon are a good inclusion, but sadly are really the only ones of their kind. I would have loved to see a Pokemon clinging to a wall or perhaps digging through the ground. Or maybe to see a tiny Pokemon run away scared if it wandered too close to an alpha Pokemon. Or, here's a neat idea, what if two wild Pokemon could encounter and enter a fight with each other? This would give the illusion that the world of Pokemon isn't just about how humans interact with nature, but how nature interacts with itself every day. Honestly, I can only imagine the team at Game Freak wanted to include more of these types of unique actions and behaviors, because who wouldn't? I imagine they sadly had to cut most of their ideas out in order to stay focused and get the game completed without ballooning its scope. I just hope that the sequel can have the room to be more ambitious in this regard. Now let's talk about something more mundane. Number 6, Satchel Space. I understand why the Satchel Space isn't unlimited, because if it was, there would be no need to ever buy anything. You'd have enough materials to craft whatever you need indefinitely. But it's kind of annoying how the only crafting centers that use materials in your inventory is one in the town. It's just asking you to go through a load screen if you don't want to fumble in the menu yourself. I feel it'd be far less annoying if at the very least every crafting center could take from your inventory, because all it does is save time. Satchel space always feels too small, but you do have the option to expand it as you progress, so I can't really complain. Which brings me to my 7th talking point, menu optimization. Okay, so I just want to switch the places of favorite and move to your satchel options, because you're likely to use the move option dozens of times if not hundreds of times over the course of a playthrough. While I never once felt the need to use the favorite option. I'm sure this sounds like a nitpick, and it is, honestly. But the whole point of a menu is to save time, so do it. Now my next 2 suggestions will be in regards to Pokemon battles. I want multi-Pokemon battles. Arceus' new battle system isn't bad, but I'd be lying if I thought it was as fulfilling as the main games. Mainly because I can't imagine something like a Nuzlocke challenge being as fun. Maybe a type restriction or a single Pokemon challenge. But the ability to switch out and still possibly be able to attack just makes you a tad too powerful. Although with the different ways speed is valued in Arceus, it got my noodle cooking. More traditional RPGs have been using the entire party for battles ever since the rudimentary days of the genre. Pokemon was actually unique in being an RPG where you got to decide which Pokemon would take the next attack. But seeing how Legends Arceus has changed the battle system to value speed differently, and you and your opponent aren't deciding your moves at the same time, I feel the easiest way to get more complexity out of the gameplay is to allow you to use more Pokemon at once, and to adjust the difficulty enough to match. This would also allow status moves to be more useful, or open the opportunity for new support moves. Currently Pokemon doesn't have a whole lot of support moves of this type, the only ones coming to mind being Helping Hand and Heal Pulse, but it would be a simple matter coming up with new ones. The real challenge would be in balancing. Now obviously being able to gang up on a wild Pokemon would make catching and grinding pitifully easy, but for trainers and boss battles, it makes a ton of sense to me. Although I can imagine one difficulty with this is that a legendary or a boss Pokemon that you catch will feel less impressive once you catch it. You know the meme with the boss in his boss fight versus the boss when he's a playable character kind of way. But if it can make the larger battles more fun, I think it's more than worth looking into. Number 9. Battle Multiplayer. This is another very obvious inclusion. However, it's one I feel very strongly about. Even though my favorite thing about Pokemon games is trying to catch them all, the process is more fun when I have something to do with them afterwards. I really enjoyed playing Sword and Shield because not only did it have more Pokemon to catch than any other game, but because I had multiple friends to do battles against, and I had fun making hundreds of different teams together with them. Sometimes we'd even impose challenges and restrictions on them, like making a type-based team or only using Pokemon under a certain height. It was really fun. I feel Arceus could benefit a lot from a multiplayer battle mode, or at the very least some kind of post-game battle frontier so you have something to do with your Pokemon. Number 10. Surprise me. I know the people at Game Freak are creative people, so this shouldn't be too difficult. Now I know I said I'd try not to say anything too obvious, but I'm lazy and I really only had 7 suggestions. I just fudged it so that I could fit the word 10 into the video title. Arceus is a great game, and if any Pokemon game is worth playing, it might be this one. I assume we're gonna get DLC in a few months, far before a sequel is even announced, but DLC can only do so much. So, I'll be looking forward to it. Thank you all so much for watching, I hope you have a good one. But before you leave, you know the drill, like, sub if you want to see more, yada yada yada. In case you're wondering why the editing in this video and footage is terrible, it's because the Nintendo Switch capture function is terrible. Only able to record 30 seconds at a time and only at 720p. I almost spent $50 on a third-party doohickey to make it easier on myself, but I felt this made for a fun personal challenge. It wasn't. It wasn't. It was a very annoying process. Nintendo should do something about that. Their stupid dumb capture function. Make it even half as good as the one PlayStation and Xbox have.